Amusement parks are a very prominent piece of South-East Queensland's identity and culture. When you think about Australian theme parks, it's hard not to think about the big four players of the Gold Coast: Dreamworld, Movie World, Wet n Wild, and SeaWorld. While the big four continue to thrive, many other theme parks over the years have come and gone, some fondly remembered and some almost forgotten. Many parks have closed in favour of residential and commercial development opportunities, competition with the bigger players, floods, or people's preferences simply changing over time. In this mini-series, we'll be taking a look at South-East Queensland's lost and nearly forgotten theme parks and amusement centres. In this episode, we'll focus on the lost theme parks of Brisbane. For our first chapter, we're going back to the early days. The 1880s were a boom time for Queensland, 20 years after its separation from New South Wales, and its capital city of Brisbane was growing. Many sources contend that the Queensport Aquarium was the first amusement centre that opened in Queensland. However, a few sources suggest that it may not have been, as other smaller scale theme parks have been in operation before it. One example is the Columbia Skating Rink, opened near Brisbane town's Adelaide Street in 1888, overlooking the swampy horse ponds section of Wheat Creek. The rink was short-lived and only lasted for 2 years. According to the Museum of Brisbane website, the outdoor area surrounding the rink contained circuses, animal yards, and according to a Brisbane City Council website, apparently contained one of Brisbane's first roller coasters. When the Columbia Skating Rink was closed in 1890, the building became one of Brisbane's first motor dealerships. 30 years later, the building was closed off and demolished, and the site was chosen for the construction of today's Brisbane City Hall, opened in 1930. Further downriver in the suburb of Hemmant, the Queensport Aquarium was the idea of Charles Anderson, the manager of Sydney's Bondi Aquarium. Anderson simply thought it was Queensland's turn to have a permanent fun fair. An 11-acre property was acquired overlooking the Brisbane River, and a menagerie of animals were purchased from Brisbane resident Charles Higgins. Higgins, a controversial figure, owned a property in Toombul where he kept a collection of tigers and often showcased them on the corner of George and Turbot Street with many of his other exotic pets. One of the tigers, named Jimmy, aroused panic within the streets of Brisbane town when it escaped from its enclosure on the 21st of November 1888. Higgins's 5 tigers, a cheetah, 5 dingoes, several monkeys and snakes were later sold and relocated to the new aquarium. The Queensport Aquarium opened on the 7th of August in 1889, located near the newly opened Hemmant train station. Passengers could take a leisurely cruise from Campbell's Wharf to the park via 3 of the park's privately owned steamboats. The Queensport Aquarium was an instant success and was electrified the following month, allowing it to remain open 3 nights a week. The park included a zoo, seal shows, a roller coaster ride, as well as a concert hall, dining facilities, and a picnic area where visitors could play games of cricket. The nearby land was subdivided to create new housing and commercial estates. In May 1891, the Queensport Aquarium was the site of Queensland's first hot air balloon flight, conducted by aeronaut Professor Chris Fernandez. Although the balloon deflated and almost fell into the Brisbane River, Professor Fernandez was quickly able to recover, and the feat was a success. But being so close to the Brisbane River, the Queensport Aquarium became subject to the great floods of 1890 and 1893. A heavy storm in 1892 caused some major damages to the roller coaster, blowing its carriages into the Brisbane River. The 1893 floods reportedly broke down the park's boundary fences, setting many of the animals free and causing irreparable damages to the park attractions. Despite recovery and rescue of the animals, the park did not recuperate from the incident. All of the animals and the steamships were sold off, and the Queensport Aquarium continued to trade as a pavilion hall for dances and concerts. The park had fallen from public favour by then, and could not repeat the successes it had once enjoyed in the late 1880s. The Queensport Aquarium eventually closed in 1897, and the site was considered as a new Brisbane hospital. However, being too close to a nearby meatworks, the idea was abandoned. The aquarium building was eventually demolished, and the former site is currently an industrial estate within Hemmant. The nearby street that leads to the former park site is aptly titled Aquarium Avenue. Other than short-term agricultural events like the annual Brisbane Royal Show, the Ekka, Brisbane wouldn't have a permanent inner-city amusement site for many years. When the Cloudland Ballroom was built in 1940, it was intended to include a fun park and rides, and open under the name Luna Park. This never eventuated, and Cloudland remained as a function hall until its demolition in 1982. But smaller entertainment centres began to develop in Brisbane's surrounding areas. There was the Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary and Fig Tree Pocket, which opened in 1927, the Scarborough Fun Fair, which opened in 1946, and Alma Park Zoo, which would open in Dakabin in 1969. Like the Lone Pine Sanctuary, it too was incredibly popular. The Scarborough Fun Fair contained mini-golf, train rides, and many other attractions appealing to young kids, and continued to trade until 1983, when it was demolished to make way for a church. The neighbouring town of Sanford had a few recreational parks from the 1960s until the 1990s. There was Adventureland, a short-lived amusement park in the late 1960s, located on Mount O'Reilly Road. There was a go-kart track, and from 1984 until 1993 was the Sanford Grass Ski Park. This was a fun Queenslander alternative to the snowfields, and even included a bobsled.
Sanford Grass Ski was the first to bring the thrill of the Alps to the city, and now they've done it again with a sensational bobsled ride. We issue a challenge to all ages. Come for the ride of your life down 700 metres of pure thrill.
By the 1970s and 1980s, waterparks would also flourish around suburban Brisbane. Most notably in the western suburb of Jindalee opened Amazon's Aquatic Adventureland, which was one of Brisbane's most beloved waterparks throughout the 80s and 90s. Built in 1982, it had aquatic pools, water slides, and a movie screen where attendees could watch films while floating in the pool. However, like most of Queensland's waterparks, attendance figures were often at their best during the summer school holiday seasons, but would be low throughout the rest of the year. That, and despite Amazon's being so close to Brisbane, many locals preferred the Gold Coast for their holiday choices. In late 1996, Amazon's announced that it would be closing at the end of January 1997, but reopened again that year when it was bought by former Olympic athletes Mark and Tracy Stockwell. But the park would suffer a major blow in 1999, when a 5-year-old patron was found drowned in the pool. Patronage continued to decline, and Amazon's closed down permanently in February of 2001. The area has since been redeveloped into a housing and retail estate. In 2015, a newspaper article was published announcing that Amazon's would be making a comeback. All of the water slides had apparently been stored inside a warehouse in Acacia Ridge, and Ipswich's former Bremer High School site was to be chosen as the new location for Amazon's. This turned out to be a cruel April Fool's prank, and Amazon's was ultimately not to be making any sort of return soon. Not that a lot of things in newspapers should be believed in anyway. Other water parks that opened in suburban Brisbane included the Woolshed at Ferny Grove, Mirage Grand Prix at Oxley, Wild Waters at Logan, now the location of the Hyperdome, the Warrego Waterslide past Ipswich, and Bribie Island's Funland Water Park, which later got relocated to Launton. Few water parks continue to trade within the Greater Brisbane area. There's the Chermside Public Pool and the Albany Creek Aquatic Centre. In 1988, the inner Brisbane city region would have 2 more new amusement parks open. Tops Amusement Centre was built and constructed as part of the Brisbane Maya Centre. Notable for its dragon coaster, Tops lasted for 12 years until it was closed in the year 2000. That same year, World Expo Park opened on Brisbane's South Bank as part of World Expo 88. Following the closure of the 6-month Expo, World Expo Park was intended to stay on Brisbane's South Bank as a permanent attraction. But after only 1 year of trading, it was closed due to low patronage and most likely competition with the Gold Coast. Following on from Expo 88's Leisure in the Age of Technology motif, World Expo Park had a space age theme. The park's main attractions were its 3 roller coasters, the Supernova, a 5-story indoor ride, the Centrifuge, a suspended roller coaster, and the Titan, a boomerang shuttle roller coaster. There was also the UFO, the Ranger, Alien Encounters, and several other smaller rides for younger kids. Following the park's closure in 1989, all of its rides were sold off. The UFO and the Ranger both continued to operate at Sydney's Luna Park until 2017 when the UFO was decommissioned and removed. Both the Centrifuge and Supernova roller coasters continue to run today at Thailand's Dreamworld, where they were renamed the Sky Coaster and the Black Hole respectively. The Titan operated in Wonderland Sydney from 1992 to 2004 under the name The Demon, before being transferred to the US theme park Alabama Adventure after Wonderland's closure. It reopened the following year as the Zoomerang, following a naming competition of over 6,500 entrants. In 2012, the ride was once again sold off and relocated to India's Wonderla theme park, where it now operates under the name Recoil. The World Expo site itself became Southbank Parklands in 1992, and the former World Expo Park site became the location of the Brisbane Convention Centre in 1995. Compared to the inner-city regions of Sydney and Melbourne, many amusement parks haven't had the chance to thrive long-term within inner-city Brisbane. There have been some smaller-scale suburban exceptions though. Brisbane wildlife centres like Lone Pine Sanctuary and Walkabout Creek continue to thrive to this day, and numerous indoor entertainment centres have been popular with younger patrons. And for young adults, retro gaming arcades like Fortitude Valley's Netherworld Bar have been incredibly popular. But apart from these smaller scale exceptions, it's unlikely we'll see another theme park on the same scale as something like World Expo Park in inner city Brisbane. Many Brisbane locals and visiting tourists often prefer the city's neighbouring coastal regions, the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast, as they have more to offer as tourist holiday destinations. Despite this, both of Brisbane's neighbouring coastal regions haven't been without their fair share of theme parks and amusement centres coming and going over the decades. In our next episode, we'll take a look at the lost theme parks of Brisbane's northern neighbour, the Sunshine Coast.